Welcome to the Case Autopsy, the Verdict and Settlement podcast with your host, Mike Campbell. Case Autopsy is part of the family of podcasts brought to you by Lawyer Minds. In this podcast, we explore recent verdicts and settlements from around the country to try and distill down the best techniques for you to apply in your cases. Here's your hosts, Mike Campbell and Chris Finney.
What's going on, Chris?
Hey man, how you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm excited about today's show.
Yeah, Kenny is probably, he's definitely one of the go-to guys in South Carolina and kind of becoming there in that I want to say northern part of the Southeast, if that makes sense. But the way he's run his practice that I've come to see over the last 5 years is I think going to be it's a lot of help to me. I hope it's a lot of help to others just to see and kind of get into what he's looking for, how he does it. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah. And I mean, I know it's a deviation from our normal podcast, which is focusing on specific cases and trials, settlement, stuff like that. But us trial lawyers, a lot of us are either in smaller firms or have solo firms. And so laying the groundwork and getting the fundamentals in place so we can get those good cases to trial. It's pretty crucial. So it's important.
And we're sticking to the goal a little bit, which is looking at things in detail, which is, hey, let's look out how he's doing this in detail to still maintain a trial practice. So,
you got to get very granular with this stuff. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that I've thought to myself, is anyone else really dealing with these problems on a Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, and who's thinking about this?
Who's thinking? Right, exactly. And you find out that a lot of people do. So looking forward to hearing what he has to say.
Yep, let's do it.
You're listening to the Case Autopsy, the Verdict and Settlement podcast. Here's your hosts, Mike Campbell and Chris Finney.
Kenny, good to see you. How about you introduce yourself to people listening?
Yeah. So Mike, Chris, thanks for having me on. This is Kenny Berger. I'm an attorney in South Carolina, and it's a firm I started almost 10 years ago to the day. We opened up on January 3rd of 2011, and we're recording this into the year of 2020. So we're coming up on a 10-year anniversary.
Hey, congratulations, first off.
Thank you. It's been a really good run, and hopefully the next decade will be even better, but it's been a really fun 10 years so far. I opened this place up shortly after my 29th birthday, and most people told me I was kind of crazy, and I was thinking, well, I don't know what that has to do with making this decision. And my rationale was, well, I'm not making any money where I am doing what I'm doing. I might as well not make money for myself and work towards something.
Right.
And I think it's been a good decision.
What kind of work were you doing before, Kenny?
I was doing plaintiff's work with a great guy, very reputable firm, older plaintiff's firm in South Carolina. And at the same time, I was a young associate, and young associates who don't know a heck of a lot about what they're doing at plaintiff's firms, especially, this was during the Great Recession. So I finished law school in 2008, worked on some political campaigns through the fall, and then started practicing in 2009, kind of at the bottom of the market. And I remember going to my would-be boss, and saying, look, I want to do three things. I want to make you money, I want to make your life easier, and I want to do everything possible to maintain and enhance the reputation of your firm. And you don't have to pay me a whole lot. And he was like, when you put it that way, okay.
This is a pretty good pitch.
Yeah.
Pretty good pitch. Yeah.
Yes. I got my foot in the door there, and was there for about 18 months, and just had it in my blood to want to be on my own. So my dad, by the time he was 25, had gone through dental school, gone to Vietnam, had 2 kids, and had started dental practice. So in my mind, by 28, almost 29, life had passed me by.
Right.
And, I think a lot of kids are still trying to impress their own fathers, and that was probably a big part of that decision. But like I said, it's 10 years in, thank God it's worked well.
It's funny because I remember about 2 weeks into starting my own practice, a colleague of mine was like, aren't you just scared to death and frightened? And for the first time, I actually thought about that in 2 weeks. And I said, I just have been so damn busy that I haven't even thought about it. I'm just trying to get documents filed. Yeah. I'm just trying to figure out what office space I'm going to use. I haven't even had time to be scared, but now that you bring it up, yes.
Yeah, my biggest challenge the first week was the quote unquote wireless printer that seemed to need a wire.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times it said network not found or network unavailable. I mean, that, we've come a long way since then, but not without a lot of effort, as you guys know.
Yeah, I remember having to restart mine twice a week, once every couple weeks, and then eventually it's funny how you transition into, I don't even know if the printer has any problems because I don't even deal with that anymore,
Yeah,
if it does have a problem, you have no idea how to. You're like, wait, where is everyone today?
Right, what is going on?
Yeah, the only way I know if we've got a printer problem is our printer service technician. One of the two technicians that I've seen come out drives a Hummer. So anytime I'm like, our parking lot, I can see out my window to the left, and I'll look over there and be like, Hummer, what? Oh, must have an issue with the printer. I'm like,
yep, makes sense. Yeah, makes sense.
The dude with the Hummer who comes to fix the printer, it's like, hey.
Well, on that note, what we did want to talk with you about today, Kenny, is things I guess kind of like that, but more so, you've been out for 10 years on your own, and now it seems that at least in South Carolina, your name has a good reputation attached to it, to where you're actually getting not just more local business, but you're associating outside the state, because South Carolina has a lot of out-of-state litigants. And then your growth is kind of at a time where you've opened a second office in Myrtle Beach, and you're in Columbia. And I want to kind of go through that. How do you handle those decisions? When do you make those decisions? Your hiring ideas, what growth looks like to you, and do you have certain metrics, things that you want to meet before you make these decisions? And I know one of the things that I think is really interesting about what you've done is you have like a chief operating officer.
Yeah.
And that's Jason, right? He's in your office, who's the kind of like the main business guy.
Yeah. So early on, about 2 years in, we hired.
He's not a lawyer, right?
Not a lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not a lawyer. So about 2 years in, it wasn't so much because we needed it at that moment in time as much as I thought, let's build this thing correctly from the outset, and let's get the foundational pieces in place rather than trying to go back and dismantle and recreate later. And so about 2 years in, we decided to create the position of chief operating officer. And what it did is it really just removed that role from me, right? I mean, I think if you don't have a chief operating officer, that in essence means you're the de facto chief operating officer, which is fine. That's just not what I wanted to do, because operations, conceptually, I'm strong there, but in terms of kind of the tactile day in, day out function and having to deal with HR issues and things, akin to office management, it just wasn't where I wanted to spend my time. And more importantly, it wasn't as profitable. I mean, so much of our firm, and we can talk about this in more depth, so much of our firm, the organizational design is such to put the revenue generators in a position to generate the most amount of revenue. And if that means creating a little more overhead expense by adding employees, so be it, so long as the net increases. So again, these were things that I understood intuitively, but I needed help executing.
And so at what point, so you're talking about bringing a COO on, and you say we made the decision. I'm assuming you made that. You were just talking collectively, you as the firm, but you made that decision. In terms of getting down to it, how many employees did you have before
at that time? I think it was me and 3 other people.
So you said, so you were going to bring in essentially, in a direct way, a non-revenue generating employee who is probably going to have a decent amount of overhead coming with them.
Yeah, that's right. And he's got some core responsibilities, things we talk about being big bang items. So we just kind of stumbled into this idea one day on what gives us the biggest bang for our buck and what is the biggest drain on our buck or biggest drain on our dollar. And so we started talking about big bang, big drain. And so anyone who comes to work here, we say, all right, what are the 3 most important things they do? And those are kind of their big bang items. And then we try to identify, well, what are a handful of things that may be getting in the way of them adding to the firm's success. And those become the big drain items. And it's how can we maximize the big bangs and eliminate the big drains. So for him, I mean, his biggest thing is really making sure that everyone else is doing their job. I mean, it's remarkable how much value he adds simply by making sure everyone else is doing what they're supposed to do.
And fixing their problems when they come up and you're not jumping, dropping whatever you're doing to handle a problem you're not even up to speed on.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are firms where, I'll give you an example. Let's say there's a firm where there are 2 paralegals who are top notch, but they don't play nice together. You got to keep them in their own arenas, and they just, you can't put them in the same sandbox. So it creates some conflict whenever there's spillover from one case to another. We haven't had those issues because anytime we start to see that, he's really good about snuffing it out on the front end. And
he's boots on the ground. Like, he's seeing all this while you're working up files. He's there. Hey, things aren't going so great between so-and-so. We might want to evaluate if they're worth keeping around or moving around. That's kind of how.
And he's seeing it in real time. He's real good about addressing things as they come up rather than letting issues fester or something's going on under the radar, because you can't put your attention there. He's good about keeping a real eye on things. It's almost like I don't know if this is a great analogy, but if you had one parent, who was at the office over the summer and another parent who was at home watching the kids over the summer, chances are, the kids would be better off come August than if you didn't have anybody watching them. And that's not to say our employees are like children. Again, it's an imperfect analogy. It's simply to say that there's kind of always eyes on any potential issues, and not just preventing problems, but really trying to elevate performance. And so I get to be the good cop ideas guy, kind of here's the idea, here's the ideal, here's the aspirational goal. And then he's the one who, if someone's like, hey, can I do this at 3:30 on a Tuesday? He's like, hey, you heard what Kenny said in the Monday morning meeting. No, we can't do that. We got to serve our clients. If you want to do that, we get off at 2 on Friday. Go knock it out. I fully support you. If you need to get out of here at 1:30 on Friday, do it. But on Tuesday afternoon, we got a filing due. We need to knock this out. He's, so he makes sure everything runs really smooth.
Well, so I guess from just talking to some people, the initial hesitation you get from most lawyers making a move like that to hire a COO is they don't really know the legal business. They don't know legal terminology, timelines, like you said about filing. Like, if they don't understand the importance of those, because a lot of them didn't have any kind of background or education in the legal field. How would you counter that if somebody said, hey, I'm talking about bringing on a COO, but I have these concerns? They're not going to understand that these timelines are hard.
Yeah. So it falls into kind of couple 3 buckets. So anything legal kind of would ultimately be under my purview. Anything operational would be under his purview. The financial side, I'm the de facto chief financial officer, but operational and financial tend to intertwine. And then what we do is we meet every Friday at 9:30 for an hour. Sometimes we have it blocked off for an hour and a half, but generally we're done in an hour. And so we just have a weekly meeting on Fridays at 9:30 to kind of take a review. So if I see things on the legal side that aren't where they need to be, I can convey that to him. And another thing that we do is he'll sit in on a lot of the lawyer meetings or lawyer paralegal meetings. And, it's incredible how quickly non-lawyers can pick up on legal things. Because if you know business, you kind of know, okay, especially in a plaintiff's firm. In a plaintiff's firm, it's, hey, we're trying to get the ball down the field. We're trying to keep things moving. If we don't move the money ain't moving. And if we're not pushing, as we talk about around here, there's not an insurance defense lawyer and a claims adjuster sitting back and I'm like, oh man, I'm really thinking we just want to give Chris Finney some more money this week. So if we're not working it, it's not happening.
Yeah.
And so he's there to make sure, we're pressing ahead the same way, if you had an insurance defense firm or a firm where you're capturing a billable hour, it's nice to have a business person analyzing, are we capturing our time efficiently? Mm-hmm. And you can have a lawyer do that. The challenge is, I think somebody's got to do it, right? So I'm a big believer in my way of doing things, no matter what it is, personally, professionally, or otherwise, is not the only way. What I do encourage is have a way, acknowledge that, look, someone, if you're running a business, somebody there has to be keeping an eye on the operations. It does, it can be a lawyer, it can be a non-lawyer, it can be you. I don't want to do it day in, day out. Again, I'm fine doing it for an hour every Friday, but I like practicing law. There are other things I enjoy doing more than making sure that, that our IT security is up to snuff.
So how many employees do you have now?
9.
So you got 9 in 2 offices.
Mm-hmm.
And then 4 lawyers, 3 lawyers. How many lawyers?
4 lawyers.
4 lawyers, and then 3 or 4 support, and then you got the COO.
Yeah, so 4 lawyers. We had 10 before COVID, but one of those people was a receptionist / legal assistant, and there just hasn't been a need for reception because we haven't been receiving a whole lot of people.
Yep.
It's been cool to do things virtually like we're doing today. So 4 lawyers, 3 paralegals, COO, and then we also, something that we do that's a little different, is we have an in-house marketing director.
Oh, yeah.
And again, reason for that, is multifold, but one of the big reasons is I'm a pretty good salesperson, which usually means I'm the easiest person to sell to. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, yes, let's do that. That sounds great.
That directory sounds great.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
And so I like having an intermediary there, because we want to control the message in our brand. We're real big on, and this is new. We didn't start out this way 10 years ago, but at this point we're big on brand integrity. Is this consistent with who we are and how we want to be perceived? And there are plenty of great marketing vendors who may be selling a great product, but it's not in line with who we are and what we do. So having, again, a marketing director who, a lot of her job is making sure we're creating content, if it's mailers, if it's web content, if it's a newsletter, if it's social media stuff, that's in line with exactly who we are versus, a vendor, no matter how good they are, creating something that, might be a little at odds with our intended brand.
So question on that front, do you guys have like a North Star or some sort of written out values or mission statement where it's, okay, if we are wanting to take on either a case or a vendor or a project of any type, whether it's a community-based project or anything else, do you guys filter that through some sort of, can't think of the phrase, but do you filter it through a value system, or is it sort of like just this internal understanding among the people who are making the decisions?
No, I think at this point there's a pretty good internal understanding just because she's been with us for a few years. But the reason that she understands it is because we've got early on, we create a vision statement, mission statement. About a year and a half after that, we created core values. And yeah, I would say, vision and mission is big, but honestly, the one that resonates most with me on some of those tactile decisions would be the core value stuff. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, one of our core values is restoring the good name of lawyers. So, we'll be like, does this put lawyers in a positive light or a negative light? And, kind of like.
Does an ad on the back of the OxyContin package is that put us in a positive light or negative? Yeah. It makes sense, but a lot of people don't think of it that way because you see the billboards or you see some tasteless stuff on TV. that clearly doesn't have a goal, an altruistic goal like that. But
no, and here's the deal. It's like, it's altruistic and it's good. And at the same time, for us, it's also been more profitable. Like, anytime we've kind of said, let's cut the fee for this client. Let's do this, let's do that. Whatever kind of the good guy move is, typically we've been rewarded financially in the longer run. Not always, but most of the time. Like as Chris knows, I mean, he and I worked together on a case for a couple of years. I mean, we're just never going to do anything, at least intentionally, that's at odds with the client's interest. I mean, if it means cutting fees at the end of a case, if it means, pre-COVID getting on a plane and going and taking care of whatever we need to take care of, whatever it is, it's just like, go do it. And even if it may not seem like it's going to be of much benefit in the short term, we found at least over kind of a 10-year window that we benefited by just kind of trying to do the right thing. Almost that golden rule stuff. I mean, almost like, all right, if I were the client, what would I want my lawyer to do for me?
Sure.
Well, and you did the case that you and I worked on was a multi-million-dollar result. And I remember you said you wanted to fly out here in St. Louis a couple times just to meet the family and kind of hang out and stuff like that. And I will admit, I thought, well, that's kind of, where's the return on that? I didn't quite see it. But what happened then was you met the client's parents, you got pretty close to his mom. And before we knew it, when we needed a document that she had casually mentioned, in the past, you knew exactly where to go at, and it blows the case wide open. And this was, I look back at it now based on your illustration, like, that was the best, like probably $1,000-$1,500 Kenny's ever spent, was coming out here and hanging out in some crusty old bars in the middle of a polar vortex.
I didn't even know what a polar vortex was.
Yeah. For some reason we keep getting more and more of those. Like they just came out and I'd never heard of it, and then all of a sudden we have like 10.
Kenny came. Was it 2 years ago? Maybe, I don't know. It might have been 2 years ago or a year.
3 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, and you had no heavy coat, and it was.
Well, I've never been in sub-zero weather before. I mean, I live in South Carolina.
It was freezing.
I can't let my wife listen to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like -5 or something. We went to lunch at a Asian restaurant. It was like 40 degrees in there. I was like, man, it was like a Thai place or something. I was like, I like Thai food, but God, man, I'll give them $20 if they'll turn on the heater.
But the return on that trip was when we needed to talk to the mom, you dialed her up on her cell phone. There's no problem. And she's like, oh yeah, we talked about it's in the area, and it was a document that showed our client's IQ, because it was very important for our audience that the defense is claiming he was the same after this horrible brain injury that he was before. And they had some neuropsych testing that estimated his pre-injury IQ. And Kenny had spent so much time with the mom, he knew that was crap. And turns out our client had gone to an advanced school for gifted and had taken 2 IQ tests that showed that he had actually lost 40 points of IQ.
Wow.
Yeah, he's objectively a genius before his brain was damaged, and brought him down to normal. So they were, your guy's normal. It's like, well, in a sense, but he's not normal for him. For him, this is 40 points below. So if anyone's willing to trade off some money for 40 points less on their IQ and drool off the side of their mouth, go for it. Otherwise, you need to pay the guy. Well,
and so based on that type of stuff, you have the practice, and that's the next segue. You have the practice, you're growing the practice at what seems to be a healthy rate, a couple people, maybe like a person a year or something like that. How are you then maintaining a client presence to where you can come out and have these trips? You can get this before and after witness information, which I know you're really big on, which is not typical of a firm that's operating with their business at the forefront, if that makes sense. You're still doing the client services that a solo could maybe do who's taking 2 cases a year.
Yeah. So, it's a good question. It kind of falls under what I was mentioning earlier, where everyone is kind of got their roles. And because I'm not having to spend as much time on the operational side, because I'm not having to spend as much time on the marketing side, And because we've got, 3 other lawyers who are all really good, because a lot of times if I'm working a case, like I may have, let's say I'm working on, I don't know, 20 cases or something. And about usually all 20 are close to, we'll say 18 out of 20, it's me and one other lawyer at the firm working with maybe 2 other lawyers. If there's let's say there's a particular, motion or something that one other person kicks in on. But like the case you and I worked on, it's me and one other attorney at our firm, and then one other attorney at the firm who was working on it is very capable. I mean, it's someone who's been practicing 14 or 15 years, who's perfectly capable of taking cases from start to finish. I mean, it's not a baby lawyer and you associate. It's a seasoned, really good lawyer. And so the way that he and I tend to work in concert together is he's really good at, again, kind of the day-to-day stuff, the minutia, the grinding out, the discovery, the motions, the getting their experts limited, getting one of them excluded. And it allows me to think in more global or strategic terms and figure out how some of those bigger pieces all work together. Mm-hmm. And so because I know that he's handling, say a motions hearing or discovery filing or whatever it may be, I can say, well, God, I think the real value in this case is X. Let's say we think, man, the real value in this case is showing the entire trajectory of this guy's life and how it suddenly changed. Because there's no real argument the guy's hurt or not. I mean, the guy's clearly hurt, but we need to show that entire trajectory, not in the last 6 months, not in the last 6 weeks, what his life was like before. But man, can we go from the beginning? Can we show when he was a kid all the way up until, say, age 31, then show this precipitous drop? And are you
doing the legwork on that stuff?
I'm doing the legwork on figuring out how the bigger pieces come together. It's like, what are the real money movers here? And if I identify it, then at that point I may say, hey, Shannon, if they're whichever paralegals work on the case, hey, Shannon, how about set up a call with this handful of witnesses? Mm-hmm. And then I'll say, hey, Brad, how about take these 3? I think these 2 are people that I'll really be able to relate to. And then I can go and have a 3 or 4 hour conversation with one of the witnesses. And all of a sudden you get, the deal. I mean, you get these explosive freaking facts where you're like, whoa,
yeah,
man, I have undervalued this case. I am underselling this now that I truly understand this really big picture.
Or you go the other way, which is find out. When Mike and I talked about this, I think last week the other week with Barry, maybe, I can't remember. But we talked about, like, sometimes you go and see your witnesses and they're good or they're bad, but you learn more about your case.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're doing in that situation is like, either way, it's helpful information, good or bad.
It's like, when you and I went and met with the client we represented and his wife, I remember we were driving away in that polar vortex, looking at each other, almost like a little, and I hate to admit it, I mean, I'm ashamed to admit, but I was almost like a little depressed that he seemed so normal.
Well, but no, that's a good point, because I want to go back to that is you have to get down to, like, if you feel a tinge of that, you better believe the juror's going to feel that. So it doesn't do any good to ignore that gut feeling. And I remember that we were leaving, and I think I said, I was like, yeah, he doesn't seem all that bad.
Because I remember exactly where we were. I think we were like going to the pizza place or something.
Yeah, it's like
someplace cold.
Yeah, it was someplace cold. Yeah.
Well, so I got a question. You've got a lot of irons in the fire. You've got your business that you're running, and then you're flying out to meet with clients, and you've got the before and after witnesses. If you start hitting a wall, I mean, what do you draw on? What is your motivation? How are you staying resilient through that process?
Man, I love that question. So the gut level honest answer is when I wake up in the morning, I'm usually not. When I first wake up, I'm like, ugh, what am I doing in God knows where America?
You look at the calendar and you're like, why did I do this to myself?
Yeah, exactly. And then usually for me, and again, this is just from me, usually it takes like a cup of coffee, a shower, a little bit of prayer. And then those three things. I mean, I'm going to have a cup of coffee, I'm going to shower, but if I can throw like, and I'm not an overly religious person, but like, whatever it is, wherever you draw some type of inspiration. I mean, I guess what I'm really trying to say is, for me, it takes almost a daily commitment or a daily search for some type of inspiration. Like whatever inspired me yesterday, or like I was feeling real freaking jazzed up over 24 hours ago, typically is fleeting. Like I'm tend to be one of those people who has to get a little fired up every single day. Like no matter how fired up I am when I'm talking to you guys, when I wake up tomorrow morning, I'm not gonna be like, man, that was an awesome call with Mike, awesome call with Chris. Usually when I wake up, I'm like, what do I have to do today?
Yeah.
And it takes typically about an hour after I'm up to kind of come around to it. What I've found is when I just force myself to do it, once the game starts, I really enjoy it. It reminds me almost like when I was a kid, I played a bunch of different stuff, and you're like, we got this baseball game and I'd rather be doing this, I'd rather be doing that. But as soon as that first pitch went out, you were like, yes, this is awesome, or in basketball or soccer or this one or that one, kind of once the game started, once you took that first hit, kind of like taking a deposition or something. I'm always nervous when I'm getting ready to take a deposition, even if it's like the easiest, breeziest. I know this person's going to roll over and, show me their stomach. I've always still got some nerves attached to it.
Yeah.
But within about 20 minutes of the deposition, once I'm like committed to being like, I'm not leaving here until I get what I need.
Right.
When I finish, I'm always like, yeah, that felt good. Versus if I don't, if instead of going to see that witness, I'm like, I'll just talk to him over the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Typically when I get home those evenings, when I know I didn't do my very best, I'm a little anxious. I know inside myself that I didn't do everything I could. That football coach, Lou Holtz, the famous Notre Dame coach, he was talking about, he was like, I remember hearing him give a speech one time or watching it somewhere. He was like, you can fool your teammates, you can fool your coach, you can fool the fans, you can fool the other team, but you can't fool yourself. And I think I know that. Like I know when I'm fooling myself or trying to fool myself. And so that's usually the thing that is kind of that consistent push. And I think a healthy level of general anxiety.
like any trial lawyer,
like any good trial lawyer has. Yeah, exactly.
Like, totally missed it. Well, so how did you, because this is a question I think a lot of people are going to have. It's like, okay, this guy's growing his firm. He's growing at a comfortable pace. He's, you don't maintain a big docket. What do you guys have? Maybe 100 cases now?
We have typically between 90 and 100 between 4 lawyers.
And 4 lawyers, that's you're talking some firms are having 250 cases
right.
per. And so your growth rate has been a consistent, healthy growth rate. How did you make a decision on how you were going to, you don't have to talk numbers, but like get comfortable. I'm going to finance this. I'm going to see money that would go into my pocket, go out the door without an immediate return. How do you analyze that? How do you make those decisions? More importantly, how do you get comfortable with those types of decisions?
Good question. Yeah, I'd say we're always looking at, a lot of times I ask myself, what does it look like right now? And what do we want to look like in a year or two? I think it's hard a lot of times, current culture, to see past 2 years. Because employees move around, people move around, and we're just in a more transient work society, which is fine. But we try to think out, 2 years and say, where we are at this exact moment in time, can we afford either to add a person, to add a service, to add this, to add that, and will we be better off in the short term, and will we be better off over the next 2 years? Because again, beyond that, I think it's really hard to say. I mean, you hope, this will be great for the next 5 years or 10 years or 20 years.
You know what your caseload looks like. You have no idea. It's really 2 years.
That's hard to predict.
Yeah.
But, let's say something cost in 2021, let's say, something cost $100,000. And so you're making a decision on, do you want to spend this $100,000 on whatever it may be? For us, it's the expectation that by spending, say, $100,000, we're going to make a hell of a lot more than $100,000, and at worst, we're going to break even. I mean, that's kind of one of the things I like to look at. It's, if we don't get anything, if the money gets burnt, can we afford to do that? Do we, at a worst case scenario or nearly worst case scenario, expect to break even, or, to use legal terminology, are we more likely than not to get a return? And so, that may be a consideration in hiring a paralegal, hiring a lawyer, doing some type of, office renovations, buying a building, whatever it may be. As far as getting comfortable with spending that money, in order to get comfortable with, I think, some of those capital outlays or bigger expenses, you've got to get comfortable saving money to then have the capital to make those kinds of decisions. Again, if you're spending the money before you have it, or spending the money as fast as you can make it, you're going to be, terribly uncomfortable, making an investment, because you're not used to making investments. But for us, from the first day we started the practice, the goal has always been, how can we invest and then reinvest and then reinvest back into the firm to get us where we want to be faster, right? Like, I was willing to sacrifice a lot of income, especially in years 1 through 5, to get to a point by year 10, that other folks may have taken longer to get there, and other folks got there a lot faster. With that said, I think we've made decisions in the first 10 years that hopefully get us to certain levels by year 20 that other folks don't get to.
Well, so you're not, and that what kind of leads me to the next thing I want to ask you about was kind of like you're hiring. You're not hiring 1-2 year lawyers. You're hiring 10, 15, 20 year lawyers who are, they have a lot of experience behind them. Is that kind of, that's a financial commitment as well.
Yes.
And it's also, you got to let go of some control of your cases, because a 15-year veteran doesn't want you over their, shoulder all the time on cases. Comment a bit on that type of stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So we have more recently aired on, and this hasn't always been the case. There was certainly a time where, we couldn't have afforded financially to hire someone with 10, 12, 15 years experience. Not only that, we didn't need someone with 10 or 12 or 15 years of experience. I mean, in year 2 or year 3, where a lot of your cases may be $30,000 auto crashes, you didn't need someone, who graduated at the top of their class and has been a super lawyer for the last 4 years, jumping on board. One, because you didn't have the work to provide them that would really be fulfilling. And second, you probably couldn't afford it. And again, you didn't need to spend that kind of money. What we saw was that the types of cases that we were fortunate enough to be working on would benefit from a more seasoned lawyer than they would, an associate working in conjunction with me or one other seasoned lawyer. So again, we thought that there was a financial benefit to spend a little more on the front end, and again, have more of a financial commitment, have a greater expense on the front end, but that it would pay a bigger dividend through a 2-year window, or hopefully a 5 or 10-year window, than bringing in a younger lawyer and spending, say 2 years training them up, only for them to then, kind of assume that, well, I've got it now, and why aren't they getting the big cases, or heck, they might want to go do their own thing, which is great. I mean, good for them. But our model has tended, and one of the other reasons is, and we can come back to this, the case selection criteria that we were using, by and large, there were cases that we had that we took on a flyer that didn't develop into, 6 or 7 figure cases. But a lot of the cases were, cases that certainly had the potential on their face to turn into 6-figure cases or 7-figure cases. And we thought, again, though, that type of case would benefit from a more veteran lawyer and their approach to it than someone else who was training.
Let's go into that case selection criteria, because I know you also maintain a decent referral base to where you send cases out. Because with 4 lawyers, a firm of 10 employees, 10 employees, 80 something cases is not, it's not a lot. That's I think most people are going to listen to this and say, hell, I got 80 cases myself. He should have 400.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, sometimes we'll talk to people like, oh man, I saw you got a big lick, or I saw this. And I'm thinking, heck, man, I wouldn't mind, $500, $5,000 fees, just one over the next, over the next, over the next, over the next. It's like, there's a certain comfort in that. I didn't want to do it, but there's a certain stability in having more volume. So
what are you looking for when you're getting these in?
Yeah. So what we're looking for is what I'd just say, is a higher potential ceiling on value. And again, there are cases we take on a flyer. So I'll give you an example. Let's say someone gets hit. Let's say it's a car crash case, and it's a rear end crash with moderate property damage. The client's a nice person, haven't been in a lot of incidents before. Not someone who's filed a heck of a lot of claims. Just a good normal person. Let's say they're on their way home from work and they're getting ready to turn into their neighborhood or something. Boom, get hit from behind, and they've got some neck pain. But they say, Mike, Chris, I've got this weird sensation. I've never had it before. It's like there's some tingling I can feel. It's like my arm just is doing this weird thing, and a couple of my fingers feel like a little numb from time to time. And the wreck happened, 10 days, 14 days ago. And they're like, I keep thinking I'm going to get better, but honestly, it just it keeps getting worse. We'll take that case all day long on a flyer, because if it turns out that there's cord compression or some type of, disc bulge, whatever it may be, some nerve impingement, and, it's a possible surgical case, or even if it's not, if we think there's a potentially high ceiling on a case, we'll take that. And let's say that same person, thank God they get better. They get a little physical therapy, and a month after the wreck, they feel like $1 million. And it turned into something that just wasn't a big case. We've got those. So it's not to say that every case we touch, it's like some freaking Midas touch. I mean, we don't manipulate the medical care, or our big line is, look, if we want you to do what's best for your health, and what's best for your health will be what's best for your case. And we'll try to help people, if they say, here's what's going on, we'll say, hey, here are some doctors we found that are patient friendly, that have great outcomes. We'll suggest names, but we're not grabbing clients and putting them with someone we know is going to cut on them when they might not need to get cut on. But again, a lot of our cases, what we're looking for is, does it have the potential to be a higher ceiling? Is this a commercial vehicle? Is this a CDL vehicle? Is this, is this a drunk driver? Is there some aggravating circumstance? Basically, are we dealing with a company? Are we dealing with a motor carrier? Are we dealing with a drunk driver? What are we dealing with? Are we dealing with bad damages? And is this a case that we can really feel good about getting behind? And if we feel like there's a lower ceiling, those cases we refer out. So let's say, again, someone gets hit from behind, they've got a little bit of low back pain, they're doing some physical therapy, but by and large, they're doing good. They're doing great, but the insurance company's jerking them around, and they would benefit from having a lawyer. And the case might be worth in South Carolina, because our medical bills tend to be a little lower, not that, again, as Chris and I have talked about ad nauseum, we're not like how much are the meds people? That is not our approach. It's, hey, what's the case about? However, let's say it's just the person's doing great. The case ain't about a whole lot other than, an incident. And again, our client appears to be making a full recovery, and we want to refer that case out. And we've historically worked with about 4, 5, 6 different firms that we'll send those cases to. And then we get, in South Carolina, you can do the fee splits between firms. And on those cases, we typically get 1/3 of the attorney's fee. So if we send it to somebody, and let's say they sell the case for, say, $30,000, the attorney's fee was $10,000, we'd make a quick $3,333, which, last year, on those cases. I mean, I was looking at the 2020 numbers yesterday, on our referral income for cases like that, that it added up to a good number.
So, but then do you worry about the second generation referrals? If you're sending out, I mean, is that something you like? There's no good answer to that. You're like, hey, I sent out John Doe and he had a $15,000 case and he called so-and-so who had a $500,000 case.
No, we try, like, we have that conversation with lawyers of like, hey man, we'd love to send you this case. All we ask, a few things, we kind of go through kind of what we ask. And then one of our big asks is if this person or someone they know contacts you because of this case, we'd really like to have the right of first refusal. And we'd be glad to turn around and associate you, on one of these derivative or second gen or third gen cases. We're glad to associate you, but we'd really like to have the right of first refusal to see if it's something that we would like to work up, take the work off your hands and cut your referral fee check.
Gotcha.
We have those talks. But here's the
most successful?
Sometimes,
yeah.
I mean, the problem is, let's say we refer, an attorney a case in 2020. And 2 years later, that client's next door neighbor calls the lawyer we referred him to. And when that call comes in, the person taking the call may not be the lawyer, it may be the paralegal. They're not asking a whole lot of questions about how you found us or who referred you, or even if they do, even if they say, Mary Lewis referred me. Well, that paralegal, it might not ever get to that lawyer's attention that it's a second gen case. Right. So one of the things that we're looking at doing, and this is kind of neat. We are trying to figure out the way to do it because we looked at the numbers in 2019 and then we looked at the numbers in 2020. And to try to solve that problem, what we're kind of in the midst of doing, we're just trying to get the blessing on the front end from the bar is to, for all intents and purposes, start a second firm where we would be able to send all those cases. So I know I see your face, right?
Yeah,
why would we do that, right?
Why not just keep somebody in your office to handle all those cases?
So a couple few reasons. One, I mean, we're always kind of focused on like the Google review, right? Of the man, we don't want the bad Google review. Second, if we increase our caseload by say 100, 150%, then all of a sudden it's that many more phone calls. It's that many people coming in and out. It's that many more. It's that many more. I want to speak to Mr. Berger, right? I want to speak to Mr. Finney. It's that many more potential kind of operational things that ultimately
climb up the rest.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it. So we went back and forth on, do we want to create almost separate divisions in-house, and ultimately, kind of weighing out different things. South Carolina's got pretty loose DBA laws. So it'd basically be a second firm, be the law office, Kenneth Berger, DBA X.
Yeah. Missed cases or something like that. Just like the lower end cases.
I think we're going to call it Levi. The plan is to call it Levi Law Group.
Okay.
That's my grandma's maiden name. I thought it sounded cool.
Yeah.
That's the plan right now. And one of the reasons is just for that vertical integration, right? Not only so we can send cases down, but when those second gen cases come, to be able to send them back up.
And you're right, I guess, operationally, technically, if you do want to have that, not really a Chinese wall because you'd be in the, but you have a cleaner break of, oh, you're trying to reach the Levi Law Group. Let me give you their number. You've called the law office of Kenneth Berger.
Yeah, and I think also, one of the big things is for brand integrity. If we want to be known as a firm who
you can associate outside counsel who has a catastrophic loss like we had in South Carolina.
Yeah, so if we're talking to someone from one of the big carriers and we're like, hey, listen, I know y'all probably have some questions about this case. Y'all are probably going to have a large loss committee meeting on it. if y'all want us to come out to Bloomington or Indianapolis and meet with your State Farm people, we can set aside a Thursday and a Friday to do that and answer any questions that y'all want, where it's like, that's different.
What the hell are those guys doing over there? It's like,
right. I mean, but if we're saying that to, let's say it's State Farm, and in State Farm's data bank, they see that, our cases are a certain value versus we're just 300 cases with them in a year. I think that matters.
I think you're right. It's starting to make sense now that you're talking about it. Like all those little things seem to make more sense than just trying to hire somebody for a missed division or a minor impact division.
If they come here and there's an issue with the case, they're going to want to talk to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same way if someone comes to you, if something goes funny on their case, then they might say something like this: I never even met Mr. Finney.
Yeah.
I don't even know who Mr. Berger is. He made all these promises on his website and I never even met him. We just don't want that reputation. We'd rather create a firm that is structured to be able to move more volume, but do it in a really, we think there's a gap in the market to some degree. We love the people we send cases to, but we'd love to see a situation where there was a firm that was doing a little higher volume, but was doing it with the exact same principles, vision, mission in place that we have here.
So I got a question for you. It kind of goes, it's on the other end of the spectrum from the question I asked previously, but this has to go with not getting yourself jazzed up to do something, but when you are delegating the witness interviews, depositions, things like that, how do you get over, I guess, the ego? That's what it is for me. How do you get over the ego part of it, where you think I should do this because I'm the one that's going to be able to extract the information that I know that I want to get? Chris is shaking his head.
I know that. But I actually have co-counseled cases with both of you guys on here, and I've never had that problem with either of you. But I know, but we've, with Mike, I've had calls. With Kenny, I've had calls too, where it's like, all right, we got this depot coming up. I'm not doing it. Brad and Kenny's office is doing it, or Mike, you're going to do it. I just, want to talk about it. And there is an issue. Everybody.
Right. I feel like we have an associate now in our office. So for some context, we have an associate now in our office. She's starting to do her first depots. And I'm like, I can do this if you want me to.
You just sit there and let me do it.
Like if you want me to do these, I can do these. And if you want to keep watching me, so.
Yeah. I think, like a lot of people go through, I think it's, the way I look at it is, and I just kind of stumbled into this, I'm sure someone else has said it, and maybe I heard it somewhere and just took an amalgamation of different things and condensed it. But I think it's basically train, trust, and delegate. Like if I've trained a capable person, then I should be able to trust them to do it. And then at that point, I should be able to delegate it. And if I haven't, then that's on me. Like I can't expect somebody, I can't be like, oh, I'm going to delegate this without, I think, providing certain expectations at least. Or a lot of times I'll say, hey, look, here are some things that I think we probably want out of this deposition. And then we'll role play it. And once we do that a handful of times, typically they do it better than I do. In whatever it is, because here's the deal: the things that I think I'm like, when my head tells me, or other people are like, you're really good at that. Well, those are things I'm probably going to continue doing. But if there are things that I recognize, I'm like, man, I'm not that great at that. Someone else can probably do that just as well, if not better, than I can.
Concrete, you're more comfortable doing a neuropsych exam. But cross exam or depot, and it's better to have Brad do a accident reconstructionist.
Yeah, like he's got a more mechanical mind than I do.
Yeah,
he understands mechanics. We've had like some weird kind of quasi products cases. He's real good at understanding that stuff. I'm like, can you draw it for me? And I'm like, oh, that's not what I thought it was going to look like. Whereas Brad has a firmer understanding of those things and did a great job. The case that Chris was talking about, I mean, he just basically kicked the crap out of a couple of their experts, got one of them excluded, and got the other one's testimony limited to where there wasn't a whole lot the person could say. And
limited
so
to where it was time to pay. Basically,
and so I do a good job. I mean, and Chris does too. I mean, I think both of us are pretty solid writers and pretty solid in terms of being able to say, hey folks, here's what the big picture looks like. Let me present it for you. Be it PowerPoint form and demand letter form, of being able to take the entirety, all those different brushstrokes, and then be able to, pull the curtain back and be like, here's the picture. It's ugly for you guys and it's getting worse. So, Brad did a great job, for instance, of those depositions and some motions hearings. And then I was able to come in, and put together those pieces and some other pieces in a demand letter, and then send a draft to Chris. Chris made the demand letter better. We sent it off, and then both of us kind of tag teamed some different pressure points and got the thing, resolved, I think in July, in the freaking middle of the pandemic, for a couple $1 million than what they said they were going to pay 5 months earlier at mediation. So, and that's not that we did it. It's not to say that other people haven't done that same exact thing and done it on a much better and bigger scale. It's just principally the idea of letting other people on your team doing things that they are really good at, so you can spend as much time as possible focusing on things that you're really best at. And, in terms of delegating, what we typically do is some of the folks who work here are former insurance defense lawyers or former government defense lawyers. And so we kind of go with the medical model, of watch one, do one, teach one, except it's watch a handful of them. And then once, let's say we've got a truck wreck case, I'm not going to say, hey, here's a truck wreck case. You haven't done a lot of truck wreck litigation. Go do this 30B6, and here's some of the things I'd ask. Instead, it's like, hey, we got this 30B6 coming up. Why don't you go with me? We'll talk about why we're doing certain things. We'll autopsy it afterwards. And then when the transcripts come in, let's break down those transcripts together. And we'll do that, 2 or 3, 4 times. And then on that 3rd, 4th, 5th, 30B6, then they go do it. But before they go do it, I like role playing. So I'll say, hey, let me be Mr. Safety director for company X. And we'll role play it a couple times and figure out, where they're stumbling, where they're coming up short, where they're not pressing hard enough, where they're being overly aggressive. And then when it comes to the actual deposition, we have found, in my relatively limited experience, other people may have a different experience, the other attorneys do better when I'm not there. If I'm there, I think they try to have too many audiences. They're trying to read the deponent. They're trying to read me. When I don't go and I read the transcript, I'm like, damn, that's good. That's really good. I wouldn't have thought of that. And it's also a work in progress. And here's the other thing. Like, if I like it when they get really good at something, so I can say, hey, how'd you do that? Like, I was a better case law lawyer 7, 8 years ago, probably, than I am now, because I was reading a lot more case law, which I like. I think that's fun. I mean, it's kind of nerdy, but like, I enjoy like sitting down and reading cases. I think it's interesting. My responsibility to clients, though, oftentimes, if I'm sitting at my desk, doing research for memos and hammering stuff out, chances are I'm not maximizing the value that I can provide to a client. So we've got a lawyer here who we hired from the University of South Carolina's law school, who had been the legal writing and research professor for like 10 years. It shouldn't come as a surprise that she's a lot better at research and writing than I am. Now, I write a better demand letter than she does, because I've been doing it for 10 years while she was over at the law school teaching. But something like that, it's like, hell, they're better at that already. So I'm like, yeah, you work up, you brief it, you do everything, and then let's role play the motions hearing. And if that role play, if I'm a little shaky, then at that point I say, you know what? Let me do this one. Why don't we go together? Let me do this one. hell, I've learned so much from role playing it with you that I think I'm in a good position. I've argued in front of this judge before. Why don't I go do it?
Sure. Yeah.
And you're like, when you've mentioned role playing a few times, and you're not just kind of saying, you mean you sit there with your attorney and you will play the expert and they will cross-examine. I mean, you're actually assuming roles, and it's a diligent exercise. It's not just, hey, let's just pass a few questions back and forth and see how you would answer them. And when you're role playing, it's a serious commitment, right?
Yeah, I try to read. So usually I fall into the role of like, I'm the, I'm playing the expert. So I read their report. I'll check out their sites. I kind of do the deal. I get ready for what I think are going to be the cross-examination questions and kind of pressure points. And, and do we do that on every case? Of course not. Do we do it when we think, it matters and the client will benefit? Yeah, we do. And so one thing that's kind of fun to take that idea to the next level is, so South Carolina space is pretty inexpensive. So we've got a fair amount of space, that it'd be cost prohibitive in, Charleston probably, or, Charlotte, North Carolina, or Atlanta, or St. Louis, New York, et cetera. But in Columbia, South Carolina, space is pretty inexpensive. So we've got kind of enough office space here to stretch out a little bit. So we took a second conference room that was there's a lot of space. And we took that and made it, part of it's a conference room. And then it kind of is L-shaped, and where it comes around on that L, we're in the midst of building a 6-person juror box and a witness stand to be able to, for a number of reasons. One, we don't get to go to court that much, especially during COVID. So, it helps us think on our feet and be used to looking at a juror box and a witness stand. We're looking forward to using it for clients and other witnesses, non-party witnesses, preparing them.
Their comfort level with sitting there. Yeah.
And then when we do focus groups, focus group participants come in, and it gets us used to talking to folks sitting in a jury box. Just kind of same idea. I mean, I think it's like practice. If we make it really freaking hard, the game tends to be a little easier. And when we loaf, we're always surprised by the speed of the game and how we got our ass kicked.
Right. It's a great point. Yep.
With all that said, I mean, I don't want to create the perception that there aren't days where I'm like not picking up freaking trash out of a parking lot, or, wondering why the phone didn't get answered. I mean, we still have all those same freaking problems, that every other, smaller plaintiff's firm in the country does. We just try to be as proactive and as assertive as possible in addressing them kind of head on before they're allowed to grow.
If somebody's out there, say they're 2-3 years out of school, they've been working at something, and they're going to decide, hey, I'm going to make this jump and open my office. They call Kenny, say, hey, Kenny, so-and-so, I heard you've done this before. What are the 3 things I need to be looking for? What's the most important deal? I'm doing this tomorrow.
Yeah. So I'm real big on, can you afford to do it? Right? Like, let's say you've been working at a plaintiff's firm, and, you're making pretty good money, you're married, you have 2 kids, you got a mortgage, you got 2 car payments, and you're like, I'm going to go start my own shop and I have no files. Well, I'd say, let's talk about that. Let's make sure this is the best decision.
Right.
Put it on pause for a minute and let's figure out what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah. I am not the, everyone should go out and start their own firm and take on the world. Here's my thing. I think, you got 3 decisions to make. You either stay where you are, and in staying where you are, I mean, you got, there's some latitude. I mean, there are things that if you're not 100% happy with where you are, we'll see if you can be happy with where you are. Are there things that can change internally to where you don't have to leave firms? I mean, a lot of times, hell, man, if, it's much easier to improve your current situation typically than it is to freaking start all over. So it's like, stay where you are, and just, is there a way to make it better? Is there a better option going and working for or with somebody else? And that might be a great option. Or would you be best off going and starting your own shop. Like when I was thinking about starting my own shop, I mean, I looked at those options. I was like, I could stay where I am. I could go work for somebody else, or I could start my own shop. And for me, at that moment in time, again, I was 29. I just turned 29, and I didn't have any kids. My girlfriend and I were a long ways from thinking about marriage. I'm trying to think. I had a mortgage payment of like, I don't know, maybe $1,100 a month or something. I'd done the classic young plaintiff lawyer thing and leased a car I couldn't afford. Really stupid.
And impress those clients when you roll up, right?
Yeah. Because they're like, man, my baby faced 27-year-old lawyer. Yeah, he deserves a, export. But yeah, so I was in a position where I could take on that financial risk, and what I had about $40,000 saved up. So I was, very undercapitalized, but I didn't know enough to know that. And so I in essence drained all my savings and loaned the firm $40,000 to get started. And then at the end of that year, we were able to resolve a couple pretty good cases. I was able to pay myself back the $40,000 and make as much money as I had the year before at my current position. And then the second year was a little better. The third year was a little better. The fourth year was a little better. The fifth year was a little better. Then the sixth year, it wasn't really until, and Chris and I have talked about this, it wasn't really until year six that we saw any type of significant jump as far as my personal earnings. Because again, we consistently are figuring out how can we put money back in the firm. And we do the same thing right now. Like we've got I love our office location, but we ended up having basically a homelessness problem. Not far from our office, God bless them. But we had people who, were sleeping by in the office and stuff. And you wouldn't think it's like, I kind of look around like, it's a nice neighborhood, but there was a series of decisions that government leaders made that basically made the sidewalk in front of our office like a thoroughfare. And so, we had to do something for security purposes to make me and the paralegals and other lawyers and everyone else feel safe. So, we spent money on this cool looking fence that I'm staring at right now with brick columns, and it looks cool. And we didn't, do the most ornate brickwork and crazy freaking gargoyles. I mean, we didn't spend $250,000 on the thing and go nuts. We didn't make it ornate. We made it, that is nice, and
Right.
So, we're always kind of trying to figure out what can we do to again, make our employees better, make our firm better. I mean, we spend a lot of money, with continuing education with the lawyers. We're willing to spend it with the paralegals. And we just try to invest in them. Now, the flip side of that, and we tell everyone this at the initial interview, and this I think is important. We say, look, everything we talk about in this interview that you tell us, we're going to hold you to. The same way you're going to hold us to whatever we tell you. So if we say, hey, Mike, or hey, Chris, we're going to pay you X number of dollars, and we're going to give you such and such amount of vacation. We're going to give you a 401k, and we're going to give you this. We're going to give you that. We're going to do all those things. Okay. And in return, you're going to provide the work that you've talked about. Well, 6 months from now, if you're having a tough time at the house, or you got some personal stuff going on, you think, man, I'm just going to give 75% of what I promised during that interview. I'm just going to give this thing like, I'm going to show up, but I got some other stuff I got to do. I'm distracted. I'll give them about 70% effort. Well, that's no more fair to us than it would be if suddenly you got your paycheck and it was 70% of your salary, and you're like, what the heck? And I was like, hey man, I just felt like giving you 70%. It's just not fair. So we say, hey, we're going to set a real high bar for you from a comp benefit, capacity, origination. You can make as much money as you want to make. You can do all those things here. We're going to put you in a position to do it. But you've got to uphold your end. And if you don't, let's know now, because 6 months from now when the honeymoon's over, we want to make sure this is a great fit. If it's not, hey, that's cool. We can shake hands and be happy we had the conversation. And if it is, know that we've got very high expectations. There's a saying that I heard some lawyers out in Arizona, and I'm like, it's ballsy, but that's good. They were like, at our firm, good will get you fired. And I was like, ooh, that's good. So we try to say, hey, look, we're really not after good. We didn't start this place to be good. We're after great. Now we come up short every day, all the time, but we aspire to be great. So if you just aspire to be good, this isn't the best fit. So one of the challenges that we've had historically is there are times where the firm and its evolution or progress may have outpaced some of the capacity for folks who've worked here. And we've always ended on good terms. And I think there's always been understanding of, what looked good 2 years ago may not now. So that's why I say from those experiences of kind of where the firm may have outpaced or outgrown someone's abilities in say a 2-year window, we have now started with the mindset of here's where we want to be 2 years from now. Will this person be a good fit at that moment in time?
Yeah.
And if we have to spend a little more right here and now to get us there, historically, we've been willing to do it.
So let's say you're a new lawyer, younger lawyer, and you're thinking, okay, I want to find I don't want to go out and start my own practice. I want to find my way into Kenny's law firm or someone's law firm like Kenny, someone with prestige and excellence. Would you tell them, similar to the legal research and writing professor you hired, really focus on what you're great at and really get, perfect that skill. So for example, if you're good at writing briefs and motions, really focus on that if you have the ability to do so. Or would you say, yeah, you kind of just still have to be a jack of all trades, but just show us that you're going to work on everything really hard?
It's a great question. Let me
because I don't know the answer to it. So
let me I'm thinking, because I don't want to give advice per se. I'm trying to think in my personal experience, what I've seen at some other firms.
I'm wanting you to answer that question for me personally. Like, Kenny, what should I do, man? Should I just focus on bad faith stuff, or should I go, try to be a trial lawyer?
Yeah. It's all right, I'll go with the classic legal answer. It depends. And here's what I think it depends on. So there are a couple of, and I know South Carolina better than other places. But same goes for some of the big Texas firms or some of the Kansas City, St. Louis firms. If it's a larger plaintiff's firm where there is a need for a very specific niche or niche, however you want to pronounce it. I've always said niche, but then I hear people say niche. I'm like, that actually sounds better.
Yeah. Voir dire. I know.
Yeah, I'm a niche guy, so I guess I've done it this long. I guess I'll stick with it. For some of those bigger firms, if you can get ultra specific, I think that's great. There are a handful of plaintiffs firms in South Carolina where they just have some badass motion brief appellate lawyers where I'm like, they're killing it. For your typical 1 to 10 lawyer plaintiffs firms, or 1 to 5, 1 to 7 lawyer plaintiffs firms, I think it's important to have a wider array of skills, unless you can show that by going super deep in that one particular area, that it's going to be best for you and everyone else at the firm. Like if we had someone here who they took the best damn, medical expert deposition that I'd seen, and we had enough medical expert depositions for them to take, it's like, hey, go for it, buddy.
That's your only job. Just go win those. You just go dominate.
Yeah. I think in the plaintiff's world, and again, your market may be different than ours. In South Carolina, I think it's better in smaller markets or less populated portions of the country. I think it's important to be able to take a case from start to finish. I think it's important to be able to research an issue, to craft a proper motion, to craft a good memorandum. I think it's important to be able to go try a case from start to finish by yourself. I think it's important to be able to do all those things. Now, once you've done all that, and then all of a sudden it becomes you are the motions guy or the motions gal, or you are the trial lawyer. You're the Keith Mitnick of a firm that's not the same size as Morgan & Morgan, but you're the dude or the gal. That's great. I think you've got to evolve to that place. And I think it's got to be a really special set of circumstances that permits you to be that narrow, but that probing.
Sure. That makes it makes a lot of sense.
So, and I'll get, again, my personal experience is that, for a number of years, I was the only lawyer. Let's say for the first 3 years here, I was the only lawyer.
Right.
So I was the drafter, I was the discovery guy, I was the motions guy, I was the trial lawyer.
The printer tech.
Dude, I had everything to fix the printer other than the freaking Hummer. I did all that stuff. And I think it's important to be able to do all those things, develop that skill set. And then once you find something and get a reputation for it, can you sustain it? I'll give you an example. Sometimes I think people get overly boxed in. Like if I knew that Chris Finney just did, we'll say, what's something ultra specific? If Chris Finney just did elevator cases, and he'd hit some big ones. He had a couple elevator wrongful death cases. He had some severed limb cases, and Chris Finney had hit some 8-figure elevator cases. Well, then the elevator work dried up, or there were other cases that Chris could do, but he was so hyper niched into one area that they just kind of boxed him into to be in that typecast like they do in Hollywood. Like, for us, we do a lot of stuff involving traumatic brain injury. And we've worked really hard to position ourselves as one of the firms or the firm in South Carolina to reach out to when there's a case involving traumatic brain injury. The flip side of that is one of our lawyers was talking to a colleague maybe 3 weeks ago. He was like, we've got some big licks on these dram shop cases, keep us in mind if you ever got this, or, truck wreck case, da, da, da. And the guy was like, what? I just thought Kenny did brain injury cases.
Yeah, sure.
And I wanted to be like, well, where do you think those cases come from? Right. What is it you think has to happen for, that's how we started doing more truck wrecks and more tram shop, is because a lot of times there's drunk drivers and commercial motor vehicles that were causing this type of brain damage. So I think there's a balance. And then to go back to Chris's question about what would I tell someone if they were wanting to start their own shop? Let's say that's what they're doing. Okay. They're going to start their own shop. First things first, you got to have your fundamentals in place. And by that, I mean, it's 2020, almost 2021. I guess by the time this airs, it's 2021. You got to have freaking phone lines, a fax machine, a website, a place for people to park. People have to find you. Real things that are easy to overlook, like where are my clients going to park? Is my space handicap accessible? Do I have a website where people can find me? Do our telephone lines work? Clients have to be able to reach you. So just as a threshold matter, I'd say, make sure that people can find you, because it's really hard to get clients if you can't be found. Second, make sure you've got enough cases where you can sustain your first 12 or 18 months of expenses. And then third, have a plan in place as to how you're going to get cases. When you've got to get cases, it may be lawyer referrals, it may be any number of different ways. You might say, I want to start doing a really specific TV ad. We haven't ever done television or billboards because it just doesn't fit our model per se. But I think you've got to know, again, how are clients going to find me? Do I have enough cases in hand to fund this thing? And then how am I going to continue bringing in new work? Because if you don't have clients, you could be the most brilliant lawyer in America, but no one's going to know it.
Yeah.
Well, so there were a few more things I wanted to go over with you, but maybe we'll save them for another time because we've been going for about an hour and a half here, I think. So we'll cut you off at that. If people want to get a hold of you, Kenny, how do they do it? What's the best way?
So it's 1-800-HEAVY-HITTER. No, I'm just kidding.
Speaking of we don't do billboards. We don't do, it's 1-800 lottery ticket.
Yeah. It's jackpot. No, it's
Well, you are very generous with your time. I mean, I've talked to you over the years. I know a couple of our friends in Dallas have talked to you about, growth of the firm and stuff like that. And you're always, you're kind of like a John Fisher. Like, you're always up to talking about it. It's an interest of yours, a hobby of yours that you've done well with. So somebody out there hears that, they're like, shit, I got a question about this. What do they do?
Yeah, man. I mean, we're all the same way. We love talking about this stuff. I like talking about the law and legal issues. I like talking about, the business side that permits us to work on the legal. So the law firm, it's Law Office of Kenneth Berger with an E, Berger. And then my cell phone number, you can email me. My email address is kberger@bergerlawsc.com. You can call the office, and then my cell phone number is 803-360-6267. So, call me on my cell, shoot me a text, call me at the office. I'm kind of like you. I mean, we don't
have any hobbies. I think we talked about that the other day. It's just like, oh, what's your hobby? I don't know. I read articles.
I thumb around in my emails looking for people to respond to.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I'd really enjoyed other stuff. But I tend to get bored. I try to play a little golf from time to time, but then I'm like, so I'd rather, you and I have more fun talking about cases and practicing than, this has been way more fun than if I went and puddled around or whatever, or piddled around at a putting green or something. I think this stuff's pretty fun.
Right.
I think it's pretty fun. Now, don't call me during the Clemson Ohio State game. But other than that, I'm pretty free.
So it's funny. I always have this memory of being in Key West, walking through a park with my wife and checking my email and reading a report from an expert and thinking to myself, this is insane. I'm working to enjoy my time. And then I realized I really enjoy what I do, though. This is my hobby. Now, some of that can get really unhealthy really quickly.
But yeah, there's I think and the way that Kenny approaches it, which he's kind of talked about, is there is like a freedom in what we do, and you can do the thing. Like, Kenny's like the director. Like, you would direct how these cases are going to go, and we had many strategy discussions during our cases, even before Kenny and our case, and I've done this with Mike before, experts going over what points you think are important. All right, I think these are important. All right, this is how we're going to get there. And then using those to bolster or improve or lift up other aspects of the case,
right, yeah.
Which I may not be thinking about when I'm going in for that expert, but you are thinking big picture, like, hey, we're going to need this because it fits in the life care plan.
Yep.
We're going to, this is crap because they're going to tie this into that. And so that's part of the job, allows you that freedom if you want it. You kind of have to make that decision, how you want to run your practice.
Yeah.
And pick up your hobbies.
That's right.
Yep. I was this time of year, for some reason, some other lawyers and I were talking about how we get nostalgic for video games. We like to play video games around Christmas and the holidays. And I broke out my old Xbox 360 for about 5 minutes, and I realized I could actually be working on cases, or building something with the practice. And it's not like a guilt complex. It's just, that's more tangible and real to me. So it's more satisfying. So it's good to be on and talking with people who are like-minded, kindred spirits, I guess.
Yeah, man. This has been fun. Thank you all so much for the opportunity. I always, every time, like when Chris we've got a podcast that we just started called Best Practices with Kenny Berger.
I love it.
Episode.
Okay. So you got a podcast. If anyone out there wants to listen to Best Practices, is it on Apple and Google and all those, or they reach out to you and figure out how to get on?
It's going to start. So here's the deal. I know it starts in January.
Okay.
It'll be everywhere. How about that?
Okay.
If you want to find it, you will be able to find it.
I'm just saying words, Kenny. I'll be honest with you. I don't do any of that stuff on the back end. I'm just saying phrases,
I know our first episode airs in January, and then we're going to try to do an episode after that every 2 to 3 weeks. And
cool.
It should be really fun. And
it's awesome.
Chris was a guest recently, and what we're trying to look at is, what are the things that people do best? So people that I know who are like the best at one thing, kind of going back to that question earlier.
Yeah.
Getting them on to talk about like, hey, here's something that's being done at a super high level. And the hope is that by listening to enough different episodes, one, I'll learn.
Yeah, exactly. Selfishly.
I mean, you get to be at the center of all this,
right.
All the spokes of the wheel are coming back to you. We're like, oh man, I'm getting so much smarter by hanging out with smart people.
Now you know why we've got this podcast.
Yeah, you learn something talking to people. You learn something talking about it. I mean, I've kind of been reminded of a few things and talking with you guys today, and it's just it's super fun. I'm supposed to go with actually, you know what? Nope, I'm staying away from that. I love what I'm getting to do tomorrow with my wife and her family. It's going to be amazing. And just I wish everyone a happy New Year.
Yeah, you got it. Hey, if you ever need someone on that's a master of paralysis by analysis, I can anytime.
Might be able to think of a guy who possibly conceivably would potentially be able to speak to it.
Yeah, just let me know.
He'd have to think about it though.
Yeah. He would, before he commits.
That's right.
Well, Kenny, thanks a lot. Have a great New Year, and we'll be talking with you.
All right, guys.
You're listening to the Case Autopsy, the Verdict and Settlement podcast. Here's your hosts, Mike Campbell and Chris Finney.
Man, that guy is doing it all right.
He has a ton of firsthand knowledge and experience, and you can tell what I liked about when we're talking about. He's thought through all these things. Like it's not just let's do it this way and that's just the way it's going to be. He has a reason why they're trying to do what they're trying to do with their people and the practice. That to me, the fact that he's thought through it all was definitely apparent when he was talking.
How long have you had your practice, Chris?
Me, so I guess 3 years, 4 years maybe, but kind of intermittent here and there.
Sure. So a lot of the things he was talking about, growth and things like that, are things you're experiencing.
Absolutely. It's kind of like, and you and I have talked about this offline a ton of times. How are you putting people to handle things as best they can for you? But also, like we talked about it on this episode, is like the ego. Do I really need to be doing that? Can somebody else do that? Like Kenny said, it's like, hey, let's train them and delegate them and all that type of stuff. And it's, that's something I struggle with.
By far, that was the hardest thing for me to do. And it's still the hardest thing for me to do is delegate. But I still also want the right to complain about all of the work that I have to do. So on the one hand, I don't want to delegate, but two, I also want to feel overwhelmed, So it's definitely an interesting thing. So it's nice to hear him walk through that with us, how he approaches that and gets through that himself. Absolutely.
So it was great.
Well, man, it was another great episode, and looking forward to the next one.
Let's do it. Yep. I'll talk.
That concludes another episode of Case Autopsy, the Verdict and Settlement podcast. Part of the Lawyer Minds ecosystem. Thank you for listening, and we truly hope it was worth your time. Please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Explore the other content that Lawyer Minds has to offer, and engage with us on social media. Your feedback and ideas are always welcomed. See you next time.